You know, when we think about science, we kind of picture this clean, straight line to the truth, right? Like a series of eureka moments from super geniuses in perfect white lab coats. But the real story? Oh, it's so much messier, way more accidental, and honestly, profoundly more human. So today, we're going to dig into the weird, the frustrating, and the absolutely incredible stories behind some of the world's biggest discoveries.
Okay, I know. That sounds like the beginning of a really terrible joke. But the answer to this question, well, it actually unlocks one of the most important scientific finds of the entire 20th century. And it all kicked off with a sound that was just incredibly annoying.
All right, so picture this. The year is 1965. We've got two young astronomers, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson, working at Bell Labs in New Jersey. They've got their hands on this huge, powerful communications antenna, and they're ready to scan the cosmos. But there's just one little problem.
No matter where they pointed that thing, day, night, summer, winter, they heard this constant, infuriating hiss. And for a whole year, they tried everything they could possibly think of to get rid of it. I mean, they checked every single circuit, they rebuilt their instruments, they wiggled every wire, they even climbed up on the dish and put duct tape over every single seam and rivet. And still, that hiss just wouldn't go away.
So in their official scientific paper, they very formally noted that they had meticulously cleaned the antenna dish. They were trying to get rid of something they called white dielectric material. Sounds super technical, right? A very official sounding name for something that was, well, something else entirely.
Yep, that's right. For days, these brilliant astronomers were scrubbing pigeon droppings out of a giant antenna, hoping that was the source of their cosmic static. But here's the thing. Even after the pigeons were, let's just say, permanently relocated, and the dish was sparkling clean, the hiss was still there. It wasn't the birds, it wasn't the circuits, it wasn't coming from New York City. In fact, it wasn't coming from Earth at all.
It turns out that annoying background noise they tried so hard to erase was actually the leftover heat from the Big Bang itself. It was the echo of creation, washing over the entire universe. They had accidentally found the single greatest piece of evidence for how our universe began, all while fighting a losing battle with some pigeons. It just goes to show you, the road to discovery is almost never a straight line.
And sometimes that road isn't just a little crooked, it's downright treacherous. It can be filled with just unbelievable bad luck, intense personal sacrifice, and sometimes just pure, unadulterated weirdness.
Oh man, just take the story of Guillaume Le Gentil. This guy's life is like a masterclass in cosmic misfortune. In 1760, he sets off to observe the transit of Venus, a huge astronomical event. But he misses it because he's stuck on a ship in the middle of a war. So what does he do? He decides to wait in India for the next one, which is a full 8 years later. So in 1769, the big day arrives. The sky is crystal clear. Until, I kid you not, a single cloud floats in front of the sun for the exact few minutes of the transit. As if that's not bad enough, his trip home involves dysentery, a hurricane that nearly sinks his ship. And when he finally gets back to France after 11.5 years, he finds out he's been declared legally dead and his relatives have already looted his entire estate. Talk about a bad decade.
And then you've got the people who weren't necessarily unlucky, they were just on another level of intense. I'm talking about Sir Isaac Newton, one of the greatest minds in history. This guy once took a long sewing needle, shoved it into his own eye socket, and just started wiggling it around behind his eyeball, simply because he was curious about how we see color. Miraculously, he didn't blind himself. Please do not try that at home.
And then there's poor Carl Scheele, who was a tragic combination of both unlucky and intense. This guy was a brilliant pharmacist who discovered 8 different elements, including oxygen, but because of bad timing and publishing delays, he never really got credit for any of them. But his real fatal flaw? He had this really terrible habit of tasting his chemical discoveries. He was eventually found dead at his workbench, surrounded by all the toxic stuff he was studying, including mercury and cyanide.
But you know, that same human intensity, the kind that makes you poke your own eye or taste poison, can also be channeled into just sheer, stubborn persistence. A fight not just for new knowledge, but for the well-being of all of us. And that brings us to an epic battle against an invisible poison.
Now, every good story needs a villain, right? And while he probably didn't mean to be one, Thomas Midgley Jr. kind of fits the bill. He was this brilliant engineer who gave the world two incredibly useful and, as it turned out, incredibly destructive inventions: leaded gasoline to stop car engines from knocking, and CFCs, also known as Freon, which basically made modern refrigerators and air conditioners possible.
Now, enter our hero, a geochemist named Claire Potterson. All this guy wanted to do was figure out the true age of the Earth. A simple, noble goal, but every single rock sample he tested was completely contaminated with massive amounts of lead. It was in the air, it was in the dust, it was everywhere. He quickly realized he couldn't possibly figure out the Earth's age until he figured out where all this lead was coming from.
So Patterson had to pivot. His research proved, without a doubt, that almost all of this new atmospheric lead was coming from car exhaust, from leaded gasoline. And this discovery launched him on a decades-long, lonely war against the hugely powerful petroleum industry. I mean, they tried to ruin him. They pulled his research contracts. They got him kicked off scientific committees. But he just would not back down. And his stubborn, fact-based crusade was one of the main reasons the Clean Air Act was passed, which eventually got lead out of gasoline for good.
So what was the actual result of this one man's relentless, decades-long fight? Well, you can pretty much sum it up with a single, incredibly powerful number: 80%.
That's it, an 80% drop in the blood lead levels of the average American in the years right after leaded gasoline was finally phased out. An absolutely staggering, almost immediate public health victory. And it all happened because one scientist just wanted to know how old a rock was.
But here's the sobering part of the story. Because lead is an element, it never breaks down. It never just goes away. So even with that victory, we're all still living with the consequences. The average person walking around today has about 625 times more lead in their body than someone who lived just a century ago.
So when you look at all these stories, from a cosmic hiss mistaken for pigeon droppings, to a scientist sticking a needle in his eye, to a decades-long battle against a whole industry, a really clear picture starts to form. Science isn't just a bunch of sterile facts you find in a textbook.
Bill Bryson, whose book inspired a lot of this, was himself inspired by this very question. And it just perfectly captures that beautiful, frustrating contradiction of it all, doesn't it? We can figure out what the planet looked like hundreds of millions of years ago, but we still can't get a perfect weather forecast for next week.
And that's really the heart of it. The story of science is the story of humanity. It's driven by all the same stuff that drives us: intense curiosity, dumb luck, tragic mistakes, and sometimes just a stubborn refusal to give up. It is a messy, chaotic, and in the end, a totally awe-inspiring quest.
And, that quest is still going on right now. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What amazing breakthroughs are happening in a lab today, not because of some perfect plan, but because of a persistent little error, a moment of absolutely terrible luck, or just one stubborn person who flat out refuses to quit?